Okay, so getting back into our coverage over Spawn for Spawn Sundays, we do pick up with Spawn number 76. Now, Spawn number 76 is really more kind of like the aftermath to our last video, where now is Spawn wondering what does he do next, because after meeting Mother Nature, he's kind of left to wonder what can he possibly do to stop the war between heaven and hell, but at the same time wondering who the child that he needs to use to kind of help him reach the goal that he's trying to reach. And so getting into Spawn number 76, we do pick up with Spawn watching over Granny Blake. Now remember, Granny Blake is the grandmother to Wanda, Spawn's ex-wife that he was married to 5 years ago, before he had died. Now with that being said, when it comes to Granny Blake, she's blind, so she has no idea what Spawn looks like now. Matter of fact, when it comes to Spawn, he tells her that he's really more of a guardian angel, not really telling her that he's more of a hellspawn than an angel. Either way though, when it comes to Granny, she's kind of like Aunt May to me personally, where she's this old lady who's always there for Spawn, but she always gives Spawn great advice, gives him guidance to get him right back on the right track so that he is able to accomplish the things that he has to do. And so when it comes to Spawn, he's once again coming back to Granny Blake because he's kind of freaking out about the idea of Mother Nature and him being the key to stop the war between heaven and hell. And apparently there's a child out there that he has to use as a way to kind of stop the war between heaven and hell. And so he has a lot of things on his mind, but he also feels like that he's beginning to forget his real life, his old life when he was alive, because he feels like he's forgetting key things that happened in his past life. But he also feels like people that he used to love and care for are also beginning to forget about him, especially Wanda. Now that's when you have Granny Blake step in and say, you're crazy, because no matter what, Wanda is always going to care for you. Wanda is always going to love you. Now she did get remarried to Terry. They did have a child together, but the thing is, you were her first love. You were technically her soul mate, meaning that when she dies, when she goes to heaven, she may not look for Terry. She's going to look for you instead. Now for Spawn, that's kind of great to hear, but at the same time, it's kind of like, he's not in heaven. And matter of fact, once he's done on earth, he goes back to hell. And so for Spawn, it's kind of like, you know, you tell me that, it's great and all, but then I have to realize if she does go to heaven, I still won't see her because I'll be in hell, which means that Terry is technically her soulmate in Spawn's eyes in a way. Now you do have Granny Blake wanting to prove that what she said is actually true about the idea that no matter what, if you were their first love, they're always going to love you more than their new love in their life. And so when it comes to Granny Blake, she's saying, have I ever told you about my husband who died? That would be Jack Blake. Of course, that would be Wanda's grandfather. Now, there is a good reason why we're going to use this flashback about Granny and her husband, Jack Blake. But either way, when it comes to their flashback, we have to jump back to World War II. And of course, we come to find out that Jack Blake, Wanda's grandfather, was actually a soldier in World War II who would always stop by the same diner that Granny used to work at. Now, it took a while for Jack to build up the courage to ask out Granny. Now, once he did that, of course, they began to date one another. They fell in love with one another. Everything was going great. Now, unfortunately, they did not get married before he had to go out there and fight in the war. But he did promise her that he'll be back very soon to basically marry her. Now, guys, I'm not gonna lie to you. I thought that he would die in the war. And I thought that maybe before he had left, he got Granny Blake pregnant, but I was wrong because he does come back and they do get married and they do basically build a family with one another, which is a great thing. It's kind of like, man, that's kind of beautiful, except then something bad does happen to Jack Blake. because we kind of find out that Jack Murdoch, once he came back after the war, he began to work for the government. And of course, at that time, the government was trying to stop the mafia. The problem was, though, the mafia got word about who Jack was. And so one night when Jack and Wanda's grandmother, Granny, were about to leave for a date that night, Jack went outside to get the car for her. And so as she's standing at the door, watching Jack go towards the car blew up. And of course, Jack died. And so we know why Jack died. But the reason why we got this flashback is because you have Granny Blake telling Spawn, after he died, it broke my heart. Because now I no longer have the chance to be the man I love anymore. But no matter what, I knew one thing. I will always still love him. And that's kind of the big reason why we got this entire flashback, to basically say, yes, Wanda did get remarried, but Wanda lost you. You got killed off, and now she feels lost without you. Yes, she has Terry, but you were her first love, her soul mate. So no matter what happens, she will always think of you, because that's how a woman works. It's kind of like, okay, Spawn, now you have to realize, no matter what, Wanda is always going to be there for you. Now, you do have Spawn do something very special for Granny Blake when it comes to the idea of being able to say goodbye to Jack, her husband, because remember, he died when his car blew up. She was unable to say goodbye to the man she loved. And so what Spawn does next is he opens up a portal to the dead zone. Now, the dead zone is kind of like this heaven on earth, the heavenly crossroads, meaning that most likely you have the chance to go to heaven, or possibly you go to hell. Honestly, it's not described very well in this book, but it does give Granny Blake the ability to say goodbye to Jack this time. And so what Spawn does, he used his powers to turn her young again, but to also restore her eyesight, so that when she goes into the dead zone, she will be able to see Jack once again. And soon as she gets there, Jack comes out of heaven to greet her. It's a great moment. And you have the two people being able to hold each other one more time, to share one more kiss. And this time, she is able to say goodbye to him. But at the same time, he tells her, stop, move on, and go enjoy your life. Now, technically, she already did move on and enjoyed her life. But it's him saying, you don't have to kind of punish yourself. You don't have to feel bad that you're no longer with me. Like, sooner or later, we are going to be with one another. And he goes back to heaven and she goes back to earth. And you're like, man, that's kind of nice to Spawn to do for Granny Blake. Now, the book does end on, to me personally, a great note, because we do jump back over to Wanda and Cyan. And you have the two characters currently, just hanging out in the house, playing around with one another. Remember, Cyan is the daughter of Wanda and Terry, not Wanda and Spawn. Either way, when it comes to Cyan and Wanda while they're playing, well, that is when they begin to float in midair. Now, at first, we're kind of left to believe there's a possibility that Cyan has powers, but then we realize that Spawn was kind of, outside the house, using his powers to make them float midair. Now, you do have Cyan and Wanda run out of the house because, again, for some strange reason, Cyan has some kind of connection to Spawn, except Spawn's not there where she runs off to. Except on their front door porch, there's a flower that was left behind by, of course, Spawn to give over to Wanda, to kind of show that he still loves her, he will always watch over her, and that really ends today's storyline. So please, leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.